today we're going to get into a discussion and a roundtable that's really talking about the future of Web3 and looking at traditional finance and DeFi and kind of the overall potential of what blockchain has to bring. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back into TechPath. It's going to be a good one today. I think you guys will like it. And it's interesting because from time to time we'll get people from different industries, different sectors of the blockchain scenarios out there. And I think this is going to be a good discussion that will kind of lean into all of that. So I want to just bring all the guests on quickly. And that, of course, is Beam coming in from Lightnet Group and also the co-founder and backer of Velo Labs. Also we have Lily Liu, who's president of the Solana Foundation, and David Mezieres, who is the chief scientist over at Stellar Development Foundation. So great to have all of you guys on.
Thank you very much.
Good to be
Excellent.
here.
Perfect. All right, so we're going to I'm going to try to control the panel here a little bit in terms of when questions, but if you guys have something to add to a queue, feel free to just jump in on that and kind of get going here. Beam, I want to kind of start with you and really learn a little bit more about Velo and what you guys are up to, a little bit about the overall project, and then maybe why you guys are aligned with both Solana and Stellar. Can you give us a rundown?
Yes. Velo, we try to build the next generation financial network that make Velo become the financial superhighway infrastructure that bridge between the top blockchain project with the real world use case. And the way we're doing it is you can think of Velo as the next generation Visa network, where in Visa you have the FX part that aggregate the FX, the liquidity. At Velo, we have FX on blockchain. We also have a settlement network that's highly interoperable with Web2 and Web3 that's similar to Visa Direct. And lastly, we have basically the payment part that connect Web2 to Web3. So we try to bridge basically from the FX to the settlement and then also to the payment to really create basically the Web3 liquidity and settlement aggregator that have a very strong ecosystem in Asia as well as the strong supply chain in Asia. And because we need to connect to the global market, that's why we also connect to Stellar, which is a high-speed blockchain, and connect to we connect to Solana, which is a high-speed blockchain, and we also connecting to Stellar, which also very expert in the institutional asset transfer as well as very good in cross-border settlement. So we try to bring each everybody capability in to try to build the great adoption use case in the financial service on this blockchain.
All right, so Beam, when you look at the financial market, many of the things that in terms of challenges, I think what Web3 and also the blockchain has been able to solve or trying to solve is getting right at what Velo is doing, which is getting around the payment architecture. That of course kind of leads me into a question to you, David, and that is when you look at, because this is something that we're seeing already, like Visa, we've already seen a lot of evolution with traditional finance rails. But if you look at the evolution of where we're going in the blockchain space, being able to adapt and change, how do you feel things like what you guys are doing over at Stellar are being able to adapt to that? Because everything's kind of on the table right now as far as shifting so much. Do you feel like this is something that is going to flow and continue to evolve, or do you feel like this has got a lock in terms of how finance is going to be done?
Well, I mean, I think at Stellar, we're a kind of an original generation blockchain, right? So we were sort of contemporaneous with Ethereum, and we've always had a focus on kind of payments and asset issuance. So sort of like real world assets that would often derive their value from some counterparty, say things like stable coins. And so what the direction we've been kind of working on is, we think that there's huge value in things just being kind of self-serve. And so we've been focusing very heavily on everyday sort of financial transactions and making it very easy for people to kind of integrate with our system in kind of a self-serve way. That said, we've gone and in the earlier this year, we've enabled smart contracts on our platform because we realized that we actually needs to be self-serve to the point that people can actually customize the platform, even if what they're doing is mostly using stablecoins. Maybe they want to, maybe you want to issue some credit card where people can only use it for certain classes of business expenses, or you want to attach additional logic to assets or to your payment APIs, and we can now do that on the platform. However, I do think in terms of integration and impact on the Web 2 space, we're just kind of scratching the surface, and we're like making it easier to kind of integrate and access payment rails. But I think the big win is going to come when you have kind of Web 2 systems that weren't intended to interoperate, and suddenly they can be like tied together by blockchains.
Right.
So that's going to enable new classes of functionality.
Yeah, well, also I think, with what you guys are doing on cross-border, this also opens up to, emerging markets, which is really where some of these new financial instruments are going to be used quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being the case, and maybe this would be more for Beam and you, David, with the emerging market side of things, that's kind of an opportunity because you get to start from really zero as opposed to trying to fix a problem that has taken the last 30 years to evolve, especially in the Western markets. Is there a difference in the way that you approach those two markets? Because dealing with something in the US or in, Western Europe versus dealing with something in South America, quite a different in terms of a market. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I'd say we've probably been concentrating, most probably putting a lot of emphasis on emerging markets, just because even though things could be improved, say in the U.S., like things still like work kind of okay, right? So I think we're likely to end up in a situation where you can travel to some developing countries, and like the only cell network was like 4G, 5G, like while we still had like 2G in the US, right? And it's because there's kind of an opportunity to kind of leapfrog older generations of technology, and also just because the cost is so much lower and the deployment options are so much easier with these new blockchain based financial technologies.
All right, so I want to get into the collaboration, because this is a little bit different in the sense that you see different chains working with companies that are starting to build these kind of financial infrastructures. Lily, I want to flip that to you in terms of just the collaboration side, where Solana Foundation is involved, how this partnership has come together, and really kind of what do you see coming out of this in terms of an opportunity?
Yeah, we've been working with Lightnet, Lightnet has been using Solana technology to be able to move money across borders, and so that's one of the things that blockchains really excel at. They're always on, 24/7, and the most basic thing they do is they move assets from point A to point B quickly, cheaply, and always on, right? Fast, cheap, and constant. And so I think that that's really just at the beginning of what blockchains can actually do. But that's certainly a very important starting point, and where folks are now getting comfortable with that and seeing that is now that you've got kind of scale stablecoin issuance, which was not true for quite a number of years in the beginning of blockchain. Now you have scale stablecoin issuance, and now you also have these performant rails. Then what might have taken 3-4 days, maybe even 5 to 7 days in the past to be able to move money from one part of the world to the other through a network of correspondent banks and through a little bit older messaging technology that's been around for how many decades, right? And if you send wires through Swift from across the world, you don't even really know when it's going to get there.
Sure.
Can you trace it? Not really, right? And what really happens is you send in a wire request, and then you kind of cross your fingers for a couple of days, maybe call day after day and see if it showed up. And maybe we can do a little bit better than that in the year 24 and 25, right? So what we've been working with Lightnet on is for Lightnet to be using Solana and to transmit cross-border payments from one part of Asia to another part of Asia, and it shows up pretty much instantly, and that's pretty magical. But I don't think that on-chain finance stops with just payments, cross-border payments, any sort of payment. What I think it's really about is we've got these rails, but what you also have is you have native smart contracts and the ability to put pretty much any functionality that you can write a computer program about and have it execute on this platform as well. So if you could send a digital dollar from point A to point B, then you could send a token that represents any asset from point A to point B. That's pretty exciting. And then you can also put conditionality around it. And now you can start to have some pretty sophisticated financial experiences entirely on chain, and anyone that has an internet connection can access that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think, and the key here is when you see these kind of collaborations where companies are working, together. This has already been happening in the traditional finance markets for decades, so it's not unusual for this to develop, I think, also in blockchain. Which leads me to my next question. I want to stay on you with this question, Lily, and that is around DeFi. And we talk to a lot of lawmakers here in the US, specifically around decentralized finance and the merging of the traditional finance rails, because we're starting to see a little bit of that mix occurring right now. You're already seeing it with tokenized assets. We'll most likely see this in the real world asset side of things as well. First of all, do you think the regulatory framework is going to line up, or do you think we're going to see something that is completely separate and just treating DeFi completely different?
Well, I think DeFi is actually a superset of the existing financial system. I don't think of it as a subset or even as like a side experiment that complements. Because I think the vision we all have as people who've been in blockchain for a long time is this idea that you would have a global finance layer online, on chain, and all financial assets would potentially be represented on that blockchain. Okay. And that includes financial assets, the things that we call financial assets today because they're issued by financial institutions. And it's also going to include new types of assets that do not exist within the existing financial system, Bitcoin being the biggest one of those, and a lot of the crypto native tokens. And in the future, additional types of assets that might even represent what you call traditional asset classes, but are reformulated in new ways. So I think that the potential for the on-chain economy is actually greater than what you see in the traditional finance economy, because money moves faster, you can create new financial assets, and you can also interact with financial assets in entirely new ways.
Well, I think this also...
Yeah,
go ahead, Beam.
May I add to that real quick? And what Lily just mentioned, right? You also start seeing a lot of fast adoption in emerging market like Asia. Because, for example, some of the project we work with Lily or like David, right? We're looking at, for example, the tokenization of certain asset to basically create some sort of like a second currency to solve the volatility of the first currency in certain country, or what Lily just mentioned, right? About using a smart contract to replace Swift. They just create a real-time settlement that create the unlimited possibility in solving the underbanked problem in Asian market, other emerging market, in bringing the cost down. Because right now, right, between financial service in emerging market like Asia, the settlement cost is one of the major issue that cause a high cost to the underbanked and unbanked. So by bringing this solution, it's not only going to offer things to be 24/7, faster, but more affordable. And as new financial product come to bridge the untapped demand and the big gap that the traditional financial services cannot address, that will create a completed financial market that will finally evolve and will probably gonna transform from the TradFi to DeFi very soon. And we're probably going to be sooner than you expected. And I think what Velo tried to do is really try to be the bridge. We also try to create a supply chain that connect from end to end to make sure that we can really make this great blockchain technology really be executed, for example, in emerging market like Asia.
So Beam, I want to stay on that topic there for a second. And David, I know you're going to jump in on this, but you're hitting on the adoption side of things, which is very important. We have seen a lot of adoption in the Asian markets to a certain extent with what's happening in the EU with MiCA. We'll most likely see some adoption there. good things happening here in the US now with possibly a pro-crypto administration coming in. So this could be a worldwide phenomenon in terms of adoption curves getting ready to take place. So timing could be very critical for 2025. So I do agree with you. David, I know you wanted to add something there.
Yeah, I wanted to underline how important I think that this point Lily made is that just the ease with which you can create new assets and kind of bootstrap new markets with these technologies is hugely important, because there are so many places in the world where basically, because you don't have an efficient market, people aren't getting fairly compensated for their goods or their labor, or they don't even do something because there's no way for them to get compensated. And if so, let's say you wanted to introduce some new future at CBOE or something to get traded, right? You're talking about like years and like a huge effort to do that, which now you can kind of bootstrap just in a matter of hours almost. And
Right.
so this opens a possibility that we can kind of like bring market forces to bear in like all these places where previously you had these huge inefficiencies.
Yeah, for sure. When you look at the influx of AI agents, we've already started to see this a little bit in the blockchain side of things. You see quantum computing started to come to the marketplace. Where do you see the potential of DeFi, especially around these new technology advancements? Any impact or any opportunities?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of potential, but there's also some big roadblocks, right? And so one very obvious problem is that these AI type applications have way higher computational requirements than you can traditionally support on blockchain. So I'm glad Lily's here representing Solana, because Solana is kind of at the leading edge in terms of performance. And kind of unlocking the potential of hardware. And so we're definitely doing work at Stanford to try to push that even further. And in particular, we're kind of attacking the problem from two angles.
Mm-hmm.
One is that we want to be able to unlock the raw potential of the hardware, and in basically all the existing blockchains that have smart contracts, the smart contracts get compiled to some intermediary sort of bytecode language, which then needs to be either interpreted or just in time compiled to the actual hardware running on validator machines that make up the blockchain network. And there's a huge loss of efficiency there, as well as the inability to take advantage of particular features that your hardware might have, like say vector instructions that could be very important for an AI type workload. So we're working on basically allowing you to build smart contracts for the raw machine code, subject to just the limitations that ensure that it's going to be deterministic and safe. And the other thing we're working on getting is completely asymptotic scalability, in the sense that instead of saying like, oh, I built this new blockchain, it can get this many transactions per second in the worst case, I say like, you tell me how many transactions per second you need, and that's how many CPUs we need to throw at the problem.
Yeah.
And we'll be able to get that. It's just a question of cost. And I think that's very important, because when you look at like how many transactions happen, on like, NASDAQ or like Visa or whatever, and you kind of add this all together, the numbers can get very large. And so we want to make sure that people have confidence that like if they move their transactions to blockchain networks, that those networks will be able to kind of grow and scale and absorb that additional transaction capacity.
I want to jump to a couple of the potentials for the future of DeFi. Lily, I want to kind of go with you. You've been in the blockchain space for some time, a variety of companies, a couple of exits. You've seen kind of this evolution take place. When you look at the current situation of where DeFi is today, what Velo's project is trying to do, how do you see this going forward in the next few years, maybe the next 5 years especially?
Yeah, I think, well, let's see. Our industry has been around for about 16 years now, since the advent of Bitcoin, October 31st of 2008, I believe. The things that exist today, they just take a long time to build.
Yeah.
You've got to build, you got to do a lot of research, do a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of tech to be built to be able to build something, first of all, like Bitcoin, and then like Ethereum, and then also like Stellar, and then what Solana is able to achieve today in terms of performance, and be able to scale that over permissionless global network. It takes a lot of time to build that type of infrastructure, and then it takes a lot of time to persuade a whole bunch of developers that they should drop their current career and come over and build on this new blockchain technology, which isn't necessarily the most obvious option at the beginning. And then after that, to persuade a bunch of banks to put assets on chain, and then for users to put real money into a wallet where they click some buttons and they're fine with their money starting there, ending there, and still being theirs, right? So so I don't know whether blockchain is fast or slow when I think about sort of the volume of real work and persuasion and confidence that has to be built to actually even get to the point where we are right now. I think it's pretty immense, and I think that as an industry, we've actually probably done a pretty good job. And then what I think is really just on the precipice now is the ability to have native smart contracts and to build actually new financial products on top of that, right? So we can start to have microcredit markets in a way we already do with lend borrows, but then I think we can make that into an even more sort of consumer forward and consumer accessible type of interface. And so it's gone pretty quickly, I think, from the theory of blockchain moving money to now there actually really being real access to digital dollars, and not only just access to digital dollars, but access to a whole novel variety of ways to use them and have them even if you don't live in the country that issued the digital dollar.
I want to get each of you to maybe respond to this, and this is more around misconceptions because that's typical of businesses who are trying to kind of supercharge into Web3. They're looking at different solutions and opportunities. What are some of the misconceptions, David, we'll start with you, that you would like to say, hey, I wish people really understood this part?
Oh, well, the thing that drives me nuts is when people say that blockchains are good for money laundering. They're actually terrible for money laundering. And so an analogy would be, imagine that like you're trying to you're an athlete and like you're doping, right? So like if you just kind of compete and then that's it and you win and you're good, like that, then there's some incentive to do it. And the analogy there would be like carrying, a duffel bag of $100 bills across the border. It might be hard, but like once you've gotten away with it, like you're scot-free.
Yeah.
What we're doing with blockchain is the equivalent of like we're taking blood samples and we're freezing them for 10 years or for perpetuity. And not only that, but we're making those blood samples available to anybody who wants to like run new tests to like see if you're doping, right? Like basically there's a permanent record of everything you have done on the blockchain. And so the one thing that's true is that like sort of existing tools, if like you're in, financial enforcement and like you're used to doing things a certain way and like there's new technologies, like you are going to have to adopt your tools.
Yeah.
But if anything, I'm more concerned on the privacy side that like if we wanted to like we know what's happening on these blockchains. And so this idea that it's this weird, nefarious, opaque thing that's used by criminals and we don't know what they're doing, that's just complete bunk.
Silly. Yeah, for sure.
Right. It's the worst way to launder money, actually. You know what's good for money laundering? Money is good for money laundering, but blockchains are not.
Yeah, cash, just a bag of cash. What about you, Lily? Is there anything in your area that you think is concerning to you right now?
Well, my concern is that we're not moving fast enough, and my other concern is that there's a number of folks who are starting to say that decentralization is not important. Mm-hmm. I could never disagree more, and I could not disagree more strenuously. Decentralization is one of those things, maybe even a little bit like privacy, that sounds so abstract that it might not be important, when long term it's one of the most important things, right? Yeah. Decentralization isn't just something that you kind of talk about from an ideological standpoint. It's important because that is what creates an open system. And that's what creates the certainty of an open system that will stay open over time. And that is really important, not just because of some of the things we've experienced over the last few years, but then also because that is how you create a platform that can attract talent and capital, attract a community, attract the hive mind of human talent, and also of capital markets, and that's really what we're here to do.
Yeah. I want to add, right, that I think it's not moving fast enough, but I think we're getting there. One of the things that's important is basically able to build crypto to fiat liquidity in each of the market. And I think right now, one of the issue is how do you build crypto to fiat liquidity and the settlement.
Right.
in a regulated way. As David mentioned, right? Crypto is not money laundering, so it's also about educating the market and making sure that the practice and the actual execution are in line with the regulation. And also, there's a lot of adoption, a lot of liquidity in fiat, in crypto to fiat settlement. So I think we're getting there. In some market, we now start seeing a big pickup, like really big and fast pickup. But I think each market have different growth, have different pace. But I think the future look bright.
Very much so. Last question to you guys is more around the future of the financial ecosystem. You know, we're all in crypto, in blockchain. We see the future pretty clearly, I think. Probably all coming from traditional technology backgrounds and now seeing this kind of going forward. So when you look about the last question here is really around the future of the financial ecosystem as a whole. How do you think it's going to take place? David, let's lead off with you.
Well, I think that kind of in the short term, I think that we've had a situation where blockchains were kind of overly regulated, or there was kind of regulation by enforcement, which created a lot of fear and made people kind of hesitant to integrate with these systems. I think we're probably going to err on the other side a little bit, in the sense that these technologies, like just like any technology, right? You introduce email and it can be used for spam and for, like, Nigerian prince alerts and scams and things like that. And so I do think, like, right now, like, I'm concerned at just kind of like the level of kind of low quality assets that are being issued. I mean, like fart coin, like, whatever, like. And so I worry, like, this stuff is going to blow up, right? Like, people are relying on the greater fool theory, and like people are going to lose money on this stuff, and then it's going to create a backlash, right? And so I think,
Yeah.
like, right now it's super important, like, for those of us who are building like useful systems, to kind of, like at Stellar, for example, we're really concentrating on, like, everyday, like, financial transactions. That's why we have this partnership with MoneyGram to make it possible to get money in and out. That's why we're helping, for example, send aid to people in Ukraine, or not even us, like UNHCR is just kind of unilaterally using our platform to do that. Um, and so I think it's going to be important to for us to concentrate on the value that we provide, and helping people differentiate the good stuff from what's essentially a scam, basically.
Right. Beam, how about for you? What's kind of leading the future for Velo in terms of next advancements for you?
Well, I think what Velo tried to build, right, is a universal financial network, right, that is borderless. We can operate all the financial service 24/7. Financial service can be programmable, and the core Velo is how do we operate, how do we make money like formless, right? It's basically any form of money, whether it's crypto,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's like a bank account, cash, or anything, like, are interconnected. And I think what the blockchain technology, whether it's Solana or Stellar, that or the bridge that we're trying to build, will help cut the middleman. I think at the end, blockchain help cut the middleman in
Sure.
between. So it's actually, let's say in the current financial supply chain, there are, like, to get to A to B, there are like 20 party. Blockchain help cut that to maybe just A to B, right? Just peer to peer. It's not just peer to peer, just individual to individual. It's peer to peer between one bank to another bank. Because even
Yeah.
currently, one bank will talk to another bank, we require 5 middleman bank. I think the future is basically it's going to be the peer to peer, not just individual to individual, but also B to B and financial service to financial service. And we do see the way they operate could be multiple asset, not just the current money that we know it. And as Lily mentioned, right, money is like the best form, could be the best form of like money laundering, right? And so we're going to see a bit something more secure, more safe, more programmable, and highly interoperable
Yeah.
and operate 24/7. I think
For
Velo
sure.
want to be the velocity network that bridge and drive velocity to make that happen.
I think they're waking up to that now. There's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of companies that are really starting to understand it, even from the old guard, from the Wall Street types, but also big business. in general, which I think will be one of the bigger adoption opportunities going forward. Lily and Beam and David, it's been great having you guys on the show today. Thank you so much for stopping in. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much, Paul.
You bet. All right. So you guys are tuned in maybe right now, and you're not part of the Diamond Circle. Make sure and get in on that. That's our own private email group that we do additional podcasts, more research. All of that is available to you just with you clicking the link down below. And of course, if you guys want to catch me out there on X, it's very simple. It's @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.